welcome everybody watching live on YouTube and on Big Train TV. I'm Shaun Salehi, and this is episode 2 of Talkin Baseball with manager Sal Colangelo and myself, an intern for the broadcasting crew for the Bethesda Big Train. Today we are so excited to be joined by 2 members of the Bethesda Big Train from the 2000 team, Tony Dokoupil and Rich Wallace. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Glad to be here.
Yep, same here.
So Rich Wallace, right now an associate coach and assistant coach at Notre Dame. Tony Dokoupil, if you're not familiar with him as a baseball player, you might have seen him on CBS this morning. He's calling in from his place in New York. Guys, thank you again so much for joining us, and we're going to kick things off right now. I wanted to start off by asking both of you, first off, how did you fall in love with the game of baseball? We'll start with Tony.
Oh, how did I fall in love with baseball? I don't think you can ever unwind it. Growing up in South Florida, it was what everyone played. It was, baseball in South Florida is like soccer in another country. It's just what you do. And at a certain point, I started making solid contact, and it felt real good. And I thought, wow, I'd like to do this all the time. Forget about school. I'm quitting elementary. Once you hit a ball square on the sweet spot, it's something that can consume the next 18 years of your life, as it did with me. What about you, Rich?
No, same thing. I think it's kind of like Tony alluded to a little bit. It's in our blood. I grew up in St. Louis, and with that city as a young kid growing up, that's all you hear about. That's all you think about. Besides that, the Cardinals and playing in the side yard, and every day revolved around it, from playing in the side yard to going and either listening to the Cardinals on the radio or watching the game on TV with the whole family. Was just in my blood from the beginning.
Well, that's awesome. Everybody has such a unique story into how they fell in love with the sport that usually sticks with them for the rest of their life. So I'm really happy that you all were willing to share that. You guys were clearly good friends or good teammates on the club in Bethesda together, because you guys started reminiscing as soon as you got back on this call together. I mean, I don't know how long it's been since you all have gotten a chance to talk, but what do you guys remember about each other as teammates during your summer here in Bethesda?
Well, I mean, as I said, I remember Rich wore the white cleats, wore the high socks, was a big guy, but could run surprisingly well. Maybe I'm misremembering that, but I remember you could move a little bit even though you were big. And
with more effort, Tony. Moving.
A little more effort? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think even though you're from St. Louis, you were coming to the Big Train from a school in Florida. So there's a little bit of awe that I think was attached to you. There's a bit of a halo effect because you're playing in a Florida program. Any of the Southern programs, generally speaking, if you were just to throw a dart, if that dart lands in the southern part of the United States or the far west, you're going to get a better baseball program. Just on average, you're playing the numbers. And I remember Rich could really rip it. I mean, could really hit. And I was coming off a freshman season where I started a bunch of games. I stole a lot of bases and I hit more than 300, but I was about the only guy with 50 starts and 0 home runs. And Rich represented a different path baseball wise. So I think I had a lot of, I shared in the awe.
And I think for me, like just as soon as I got there, just seeing how hard Tony worked and all that stuff. And then he could actually run, which is something that I really couldn't, not like he was. I would have been, like Tony said, the complete opposite type player that Tony was. Couldn't really run that well, had a little juice, wasn't the defender that Tony was. Tony could defend at a high level. But I just think, I mean, he enjoyed playing. He played really, really hard. That was something that I admired about him.
Now, Sal, you clearly, this is your second year on the staff at this point back in 2000. What were your first impressions of these 2 guys when you took them under the beginning of the summer?
First and foremost, you could just tell they were coming in. They've been taught the basic fundamentals at a young age, and they were coming from two good programs. But most importantly, they were just amazing adults. Tony, I remember he worked his tail off day in and day out, either with Rich in the cage or with my brother Dave, Tony would run through a wall. And Rich, on the other hand, like Tony said, he was a power guy, but he also was a guy that wasn't afraid to stick out his elbow and take one for the team with that elbow brace. I don't know if you remember that. He'd always wear that elbow brace. He did that as well, but just great human beings, great kids that you would want to coach, kids that you want back then. I'm showing my age now that, if you had a daughter, you want them to date. Just remarkable human beings. And clearly it shows by the positions what they do now. So they're amazing people.
And I would just add to that the thing about summer ball is you can show up at summer ball with a whole new narrative. No one knows what happened really in your college season. They don't know about your high school season. So I remember I showed up, and I definitely had decided ahead of time that I was going to try to play more like a Rich Wallace than like a Tony Dokoupil. Mm-hmm. So in the first game of the season, I decided I swear you hit me in like the 4 or the 5 spot. Maybe it was 8 or 9. I don't remember, but I seemed to be in a bunch of positions where there were runners on base, and I decided I was going to drive people in. That was going to be what my job was all summer. And I struck out my first time up on 3 pitches, 3 swings, all of them beautiful, all of them complete misses. Second time up, undeterred, not going to change my approach. I'm gonna be hacking it this summer. 3 pitches, 3 swings, strike out. All right. I don't know that I struck out in two times in any game in the college season, but I'm determined. I'm going to hit balls in the gap. I'm going to hit home runs. I'm going to be a power guy this summer. So the third time comes up, base runners are on again. It's a tight game. 3 pitches, 3 swings, strike out again. And if you can believe it, it happened a 4th time. I got up 4 times that game, struck out on 12 pitches. Yeah. So the guy was just throwing fastballs, and I was like 1 mile an hour behind every one. Then, unbelievably, I don't get pulled. I don't know what you're thinking, Coach, but you keep me in the game. And I get a 5th at bat. And I can't remember if we were playing 7 or 9 innings, but it was the bottom of the last inning. Oh. And the bases might have been loaded, but there are definitely people on. And I got 2 strikes against me, both swinging and missing clean. And on the 3rd pitch, I finally connected and I hit a double. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure, I think it was a game-winning hit. Though I succeeded narrowly in my endeavor to be an RBI guy.
Well, it's kind of pick up from that story. Tony is correct. That's true. That happened. It shows from the beginning of the season the type of person Tony was as a ball player to the end of the season when we're playing in the national semifinal game, and he stepped up big. And I believe it was the first home run all spring or summer Tony hit, and he hit into the cornfields to win the game.
I finally got it. It took me another 30, 35 games or so and a lot of strikeouts, but I hit a home run. How about that?
I'm really happy that Sal brought that up. We actually, I know, Tony, you're calling in, so you can't see this. We actually have a picture from that tournament where you appear to be holding a baseball in front of a cornfield. Is that the baseball?
I mean, evidently so, because when Sal and I first connected to talk about doing this, I remember the story I just told about striking out 4 times and then hitting a double. He remembered the cornfield story. And if he did not have the picture, which would seem to prove it, it's not part of my memory bank, which is so strange.
Do you remember hitting the home run?
I remember the picture and I remember the cornfield now that I've seen it, but I don't remember hitting the home run. The only other home run I remember in summer ball, well, there's a couple, but it's a different season. It's got to be, unless I'm mixed up in my head.
Yeah, but I have down that was the only one.
I believe that was the.
I'm sure you guys got it right. But I think if there are baseball people watching this, particularly younger players, I mean, I think the lesson is, how you remember your performance goes a long way to shaping what you think of yourself as a player. And you should remember your home runs. That's the takeaway. Don't let them follow. There aren't that many of them, so remember the good times.
And I think that game started, if I'm correct, Rich, at Dayton University, right?
It did. That was when the debacle.
We had a little flood when Mr. Cooney accidentally kicked a water fountain and flooded the field.
I can't walk
that I
by
remember.
a water fountain to this day without thinking of something exploding over an entire field and shutting down a whole game.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
So they clearly had to move it.
Yes.
We moved it. They moved us to the cornfield. We ended up winning that game, I believe. Justin Davis, I believe, closed it out after Tony hit his home run. It was awesome. It was just like the field of dreams. Ball went out in the left center, and I totally remember that. And like Tony said, I don't remember the 12 strikes until after the fact. I kind of remembered a little bit, but it's true. It's amazing after 20 years how coaches or players remember everything that they do. That just goes to show you how much they meant to me and the memories that I actually paid attention to the little things. And, I can't thank them enough for everything they've done for us over the years.
Well, providing some context to all of this for people who aren't aware of what we're referencing, back in 2000, Big Train had the best overall record in the Clark Griffith League, going 29-11. They had the best regular season that the club had ever, or record for the club in that first decade of Big Train baseball. But they ended up finishing second in the league standings, so they went to the NABF World Series, which was taking place in Dayton, Ohio, and played teams from all over the country and ended up making it all the way to the championship game. And Rich, you really turned it on. Again, we're talking about memories a long time ago now, but looking back at that season, you really turned it on once you got to that final tournament. You were named to the all-tournament team and you were a co-leader on the team in hits. Was there any adjustments that you had to make from when you started with the Big Train and just coming into the summer versus when you left to go back to UCF?
I think obviously, I think by the end of the summer, I got used to hitting 80% breaking balls, which is what most people threw me. And that was an adjustment that I had to make through all summer. Sal won't like to hear this, but I think probably not working camp every morning from 7 a.m. till noon and trying to play at night was probably a little more energy. I think at that point, and we were all just excited to be able to play with our teammates for one last run there, and we all had a lot of fun that week.
Yeah, that was a lot. That was an amazing tournament. I mean, Rich had an unbelievable tournament. I don't think he made an out the whole tournament. Maybe one. Really did really well. And we had John Maine, who ended up pitching in New York in the big leagues for several years. He actually drove up from Florida all the way up to Dayton, Ohio, to start the semifinal game, something like that. Against the Maryland Bombers. So that was a special team. And truly, the 2000 team really kind of set the tone for who we are today in the community of Bethesda. 99, it was just, we're getting started. But the 2000, I know you said we had the best record in the league, but back then you won the halves based on half. We won one half and I believe the Senators won the other one. But I think what happened was, they kind of tanked the second half based on wins or someone else won and we didn't. So that's kind of why we finished second. But whether we went to Johnstown or we went to Dayton, Ohio, it was a memorable experience. I know driving, I don't know if Tony, you rode with me in the van or not, but with Pat Boren and my brother and all the Jim Cooney and all those guys, it was a long 8 hours to Ohio, but boy, we had some good stories and it was an amazing time. And I remember it as if it was right now as we speak.
Yeah, no, I agree. I wouldn't even call it a long drive because you're just shooting the breeze. I mean, that's part of what makes baseball such a great sport is because, there are these periods of intense pressure and intense activity and then these long periods of just storytelling and carrying on. And I actually love the toggling between the two. It's actually it adds to what makes the game beautiful, but also adds to what makes the game difficult because if you screw up, you have to go and somehow think about it for maybe 2-3 innings before you're going to get another shot at it. And in that time, that's when you're talking with your teammates, mixing it up a little bit and trying to get yourself back into a mental frame of mind where you can, give yourself the best opportunity to succeed.
Well, guys, I want to shift now a little bit closer to present day. after baseball, you two have gone in very different directions in terms of career choice. Rich has decided to stay with the sport of baseball, going the coaching route, and Tony has decided to go the journalism route. So we'll start with Rich. First of all, what got you into wanting to be a coach? I know your first year was at your alma mater at UCF. What kind of was the switch that made you say, I want to stay in the dugout?
Well, I mean, I think it kind of started for me in high school. I was very fortunate to have a great high school coach, actually a couple of them. But my hitting coach, David Holbrook, who played at Stanford, was great. He was great for me at a time in my life where I needed some male guidance, and he was able to give that to me and really help me at that point. So that was kind of the first trigger. Didn't really think about it until right as I was finishing my career. And Jay Bergman at UCF, Hall of Fame coach, offered me a chance as my fifth year when I was finishing to graduate there, a chance to be a student assistant coach. Lucky enough on that team, that team was very special. Got to a regional final. You couldn't have more fun coaching a great group of young men. And that was kind of it, right? At that point, there was nothing else I wanted to do.
And I mean, throughout your entire coaching career, success has kind of seemed to follow you. I mean, you ended up with that UCF team in 2004, going to a Tallahassee regional, and then go to High Point, where they're nationally ranked recruiting classes for the first time in school history, as you are the recruiting coordinator. Then you go to Creighton. Creighton ends up winning the Big East regular season championship. You earn top recruiter in the Big East. Then Jacksonville ends up getting the highest seed in NCAA tournament in history, and now finally at Notre Dame. What have you attributed most to the ball clubs that you have worked with? What characteristics have you seen in all of these ball clubs that you have been a part of that leads to this success?
Well, I think it starts with the head coaches. I've been fortunate enough to work with great head coaches. Obviously, Jay Bergman at UCF, Craig Cozart, who was not only a great head coach, but a great pitching coach. Ed Service, probably the greatest defensive mind in all of college baseball, if not in baseball. And then Chris Hayes, unbelievable motivator. And then obviously Link Jarrett, who's probably the best offensive mind in college baseball now. So fortunate to work with really good head coaches and some really great athletes.
And then one last question for you before we got to get to Tony is, as a coach, you've clearly interacted with summer ball coaches and deciding where some of your players are going to go spend the summer. Have you had any conversations with Sal in terms of, hey, what should I look for when I'm sending guys to different clubs, and really what do you look for your players?
Well, I think the first thing you're looking for is just the environment. Where are they going to be staying? Where are they going to be playing? What's the city like? What can they do on and off the field? And then you're looking for a coach or an organization that's going to take care of your player, make sure that they're safe, that they're treated correctly. And then you want to make sure that they're going to a place where they're going to play, because summer ball's probably not productive if the guys aren't going to play. And that's why you see wherever I am, most of our better players, they get sent to Bethesda because I know I can trust the organization and Sal, and it's a great place.
And Shaun, I kind of look at it as that, Bethesda Big Train is an extension of wherever Rich goes of his program. Philosophy wise, we think alike. We talk a lot about baseball and life. And I think, in my opinion, that it's just an extension to help his players, whether it's at Jacksonville or now at Notre Dame, that makes not just me a better coach, but makes, players better going back to Notre Dame. So it's really an extension of their program. If you have that mindset, it's a win-win for everybody.
I totally makes sense to me. If you go now going over to Tony, you have a very interesting career path considering where you started, not only being with your career at George Washington, but you graduated at the top of the class at the GW Business School, and then you're getting a master's degree at Columbia for American Studies. When did the transition end up going that you wanted to be a reporter?
First, I think I would make the point that that baseball is a foundation for just about anything. So the transitions from business to from studying business in school to then working in other fields, like the very same things that you put into being a better baseball player, those processes and how you overcome difficult times, how you overcome failure, how you make a plan to get better and then execute it. Like all the things that you do as a baseball player in your baseball career, however far that career goes, you can apply to anything that you do in life. It's an incredible set of skills. So what I did is, I mean, I also, the other thing that baseball will do for you is if you have downtime, you know, and you do have long bus rides and you don't want to hear Jim Cooney tell another joke, you can get a book out. And if you read a book, at some point you might think, hey, maybe I'll write a book someday. And that's what happened with me. I remember, I read Ball 4 on the team bus at GW. I read a John McClane, book called Young Men and Fire. That's the guy who wrote River Runs Through It. And it was the first time in my life where I thought, oh, wow, you know, there's something exciting here on the page as well. That's almost as exciting as baseball itself. And so I went out after school to try to be a novelist, actually, which turns out to be harder than being a big leaguer. So then writing journalism, magazine journalism in those days, was the next best thing, where you could be creative but still actually kind of live a baseball life where there's a lot of travel. You go to far-flung places, you meet interesting people. Everything's a little bit of an adventure. And then the economics of print journalism shifted, and you know, at a certain point you just kind of go with the flow of the culture and everything's going to video. And I thought, well, I never considered TV before, but then I did it a little bit and I realized, oh man, this is exactly like baseball. Like it is like the parallels are unbelievable. When you're doing TV journalism, like it is just as baseball is. It's a blend of the physical and the mental. There's physical preparation. You know, part of the storytelling, because it's a visual medium, is in how you tell it, like your expressions, your tone of voice, you know, where your shoulders are, your delivery, all that kind of stuff. And then there's also the mental, where like sometimes it's just not going to work out and you're going to have to recover from that and then do it again, maybe in a minute, maybe in 2 minutes. Maybe you have to go right into the next interview. I'm talking about in a live TV setting. And also when you're in the field and you're shooting something with a camera, particularly if there's a crew there, maybe it's costing money to be doing what you're doing and you're aware of all that. I mean, those moments when the light goes on and you have to perform, very similar, I mean, neurochemically, I mean, the way it feels in your mind and in your body, it feels the same as when you have a key at bat. And maybe it's a key at bat in a key season, and maybe you need to go to the head coach and you're going to ask for more scholarship money, or maybe your scholarship money is on the line, or maybe you're hoping to move up a couple draft spots, or maybe you want to play in a different summer league and you just need to turn a few heads. Like those neurochemically, and I mean like the way your brain processes it and the way your body processes it is identical. And so I found TV to be such a match, and in a way you could say that I've grown and progressed, but in another way I haven't at all. I've just applied the things that I worked on when I was a teenager and a young man in baseball and brought them to a profession. And lucky for me, it's worked out so far.
Did you have any consideration of going the sports journalism route, or did you kind of know from the get-go that, you know what, I really like reporting on hard-nosed stories?
Well, you know, what I liked is the kind of shaggy dog tale. And, you know, so have you guys heard of, I'll give you an example of what I mean by, so sports journalism, you can tell epics in sports. You can, you know, ESPN's making a lot of money telling epic sports stories. But in sports journalism, there's also a lot of itty bitty box score stuff. And I didn't want to be a beat reporter of that kind. And I always really like a shaggy dog story. And that's the kind of story, for example, you know, Old Man in New Mexico has written a poem, and the poem supposedly leads to a treasure chest. And all you have to do is decipher the clues. What a weird guy. Go out and tell that guy's story. It turns out it's darker than you might have thought. Like that's a story that unfolds over, you know, 3,000 to 5,000 words in print, or in television news, you know, 4 to 9 minutes. I mean, I've gone as long as 12 minutes, which is actually, if you're measuring it by the second, and that's what you do when you're trying to put TV together, it's a lot of time. And that's what I mean by Shaggy Dog story. I like things that have a lot going on, and are distinctive, hopefully distinctive. They can't all be distinctive, but some of them. So yeah, that's why I didn't want to go into sports journalism. But I mean, I love sports. I can't walk, if I'm trying to catch a flight and I walk by a bar in an airport and they got a baseball game on, like I'm going to be the guy standing there like with the luggage, just staring at the screen, people bumping into me. I'm transfixed, but yeah, it was my journey.
Did you did you ever consider maybe going into, whether it be a different form? Well, I should say, I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this question. I think did you ever consider that maybe you wanted to be a different part of journalism? So whether it be a photographer, whether it be, if you wanted to go into sports, an announcer, was there ever a person that you looked at that you kind of were like, hey, maybe I want to do that when you were growing up?
Well, so it's funny you mentioned that, actually, because when we're talking about memory, if I really rummage around in there, I do remember having a toy when I was a kid. I mean, like 7, 8, 9, before 5th grade, before middle school for sure. There was some toy, and maybe people remember what this is, where you could play like a plastic disc of some kind, and it would have great calls from pro sports. And I remember the Giants beating the Brooklyn Dodgers. I think it was 54. The Giants win the pennant. Oh my God, the Giants win the pennant. That famous call. And I remember playing that a lot in my room and feeling the emotion that was created in God, people smarter than me will remember who the announcer was, but it's a famous call, and the announcer's ability to summon the moment and deepen it just using his voice and words. It was so powerful, even to me as a little kid. And I remember over and over again listening to it and looking back. I think that is a sign of what I would be interested in the future. You can do a lot with the voice.
And then for Rich, was there ever a little league coach or somebody that kind of really stuck out to you that made you, if you really look back and think back, that's kind of the guy who I really wanted to model myself after once I started becoming a coach?
Well, I mean, every little league coaches, high school coaches, all of them had a role in that. But as far as like the college game and getting myself into college, I think our pitching coach, who then was my boss at High Point, Craig Cozart, just seeing and I wasn't a pitcher, so I didn't get to deal with him as much as our pitchers did, but just their relationship with him, how much he cared for him. I don't think there's been a pitcher that pitched for him at that point that he wasn't then attending their weddings later years, and they were calling about parental advice. And we talk about baseball all the time, but even coaching and getting to more of that stuff, that's life development. I thought he was kind of the role model on how I wanted to go about this.
That's awesome. For one final,
hey,
go ahead.
Could I? Well, I was just going to interject there. Rich made me think of something. That a figure in baseball that shaped me, and I think some people might relate to this one. I was a good high school player. Obviously, if you're playing for the big train, you had a good high school career. You made it to college ball. But I think what set me on the path that I was on, and not a pro ball or nothing path, is I happened to play summer league all through high school with Mark Teixeira.
Wow.
And more than any coach shaping me, the fact that I was 1 year younger than Teixeira, and the fact that I hit behind him in the lineup on our Legion team, we were stacked. We went to the Legion World Series. All 9 players played D1 starters, and I would have thought I was God's gift to baseball, except for the fact that the guy one spot ahead of me in the batting order was a future big leaguer, and they were pitching around him every day of the week to face the all-state guy because he was going to be an all-star. And that actually is lucky. That shaped me a ton, because without that check on who I was and where I ranked, I would have had a lot more tough learning to do. That's a big thing with baseball, is you got to know when your moment is over, which is a hard thing, but it's beautiful to take it as far as you can.
Well, something that's shaping all of us right now, obviously, the way we are conducting this interview is the pandemic of COVID-19. Both of you guys have had your careers affected clearly throughout this pandemic. Many around the world have. I wanted to ask each of you kind of how things change and have day-to-day things have changed for you. I mean, for instance, with Tony, I guess we'll start with you. I know you and your wife, Katie Tur, both have the Brooklyn Basement Broadcast Center that you've set up downstairs in your basement. And I just wanted to ask, what is how challenging is it for you to adjust from covering a story, going to a studio, going on site, talking to subjects in a face-to-face manner, and then just doing it from your basement?
Well, I will go into all that, but I want to say that I'm still working, and it's the same situation basically. You know, you show up at 7 a.m. and you go on TV. I want to hear what Rich has to say about losing a whole season. I mean, what was it like, Rich, for these seniors and for guys who don't have a next stage to be told, sorry, there's not going to be a game today or tomorrow or the rest of the year?
Yeah, it's as tragic as you could possibly think it was, Tony. I mean, these guys, because there was just uncertainty too, the uncertainty that came with it, whether or not they would get their year back, or was this the end of it? With these guys, we were on the road. We just swept North Carolina. We're on a 7-game winning streak, and these guys are getting pumped to go play Louisville on the weekend. And now some of our seniors are sitting in the room wondering, is this the last time I'm ever going to play? And that's a tough thing. We've all felt that as had that question approached to us as baseball players. And it's a tough one to answer. And just to not know at that point whether or not they would get their year back was tough. And then even after that, when they did get their year back, just trying to filter through that, like, what does that actually mean? How do we do it? And at Notre Dame, a lot of these kids had things lined up post-baseball career anyway. So making those decisions, that's stuff that's not really on the normal baseball coach table to answer and have to deal with those situations.
Rich,
so wait, Rich, you're saying?
Yeah, go ahead, Tony.
Okay. Oh, I was going to say, so you're saying that some kids who had been seniors and who were planning on leaving have decided to come back?
Yeah, some of them. Yeah, they've made that decision and basically put their other parts of their career on hold to get one more chance to play.
I get it. I think I would do the same. I can't imagine walking away without that final taste.
No doubt. No doubt. Especially when you think you got a chance to do something special, and then you're packing your locker up and saying goodbye to your teammates.
Rich, how do you deal with also the ripple effects that this has had on the MLB draft and now the upcoming recruiting class? You have guys, like you said, coming back, but you also had guys lined up to join the squad next year. There's only so many scholarships that can be handed out. How do you as a coaching staff, or really anybody throughout the country, how do you think you're going to be able to juggle this?
It's a daily struggle, just trying to figure out how we do this. And Notre Dame's been great in helping us with that. We finally made it through a huge piece, obviously, with the draft ending, and looks like we're only going to lose one guy. And you go into the draft with our roster thinking we're going to lose 4 to 5 and 1 to 2 incoming guys, and then we lose one. So it's that constant juggling. But that's something that baseball coaches that we basically have to do every year. So if anybody's adept to doing it, I think us as college baseball coaches are used to it. They've loosened the rules NCAA wise with the roster expansion and the larger amount on aid. So that's helped. No real help on the number of scholarships with the 11-7, but everything else has helped us kind of filter that through.
So do you expect any real shifts? I mean, going through these next couple of months that might come throughout the entire NCAA, like that will have to be, ratified in order to really make sure that you guys can do this in the best way possible next year? Or do you think that you have a pretty good handle going into next year right now?
I think what is going to be done has already been done as far as expanding the roster and moving the 27 counters to 32. I think that's probably where it'll stop until they decide what they're going to do with the one-time transfer rule, which I don't think would happen until the following year. That would be a nightmare if they open that thing up and football starts here in 6 weeks and anybody can transfer and do whatever they want. That's something that I don't think they want to deal with, which makes sense.
And then again, back to Tony, how have you really been able to handle both covering arguably the biggest story of your career, and then also having to live through it with it kind of preventing you to cover it in maybe every way you would want to?
Well, it's funny you say the biggest story of my lifetime. Isn't it funny that at this particular moment, I think because the sun is shining and the weather's nice out, that it feels more distant than it did 6 or 8 weeks ago, and yet it's not more distant. The death toll daily has plateaued, but it's still significant in the hundreds, and I don't think we should get used to that. Just as Americans, it's an uncomfortable reality, and I don't know what the rest of the summer brings. If it stays flat, and then in the fall it could come back even worse. So there's a foreboding that I have that affects every aspect of my life. I have to be aware of this stuff in a nitty-gritty way to do 2 hours of live TV in the morning that I wouldn't be if I were just a regular guy on a different job. And so that's hard. And my wife has no distance from it either. So, I mean, I'd like to say we don't talk about it off air, but we end up talking about it off air because we're living in a city that was really hard hit. We have family overseas. We're trying to figure out when travel will ever be safe. My wife's mother is in California. So and then there's of course the economic uncertainty of it. And then on top of that, you have the most significant civil rights demonstrations in this country since the 1960s. So it's a really wrenching moment to be in the news business, and I don't know that if it's better or worse that we're going through this moment while working out of our basements and our dens and our spare bedrooms. But you do what you got to do. We're still happy to have a job. That's the most important thing these days.
Absolutely. I mean, I kind of would love to hear real quick what went into the Brooklyn basement broadcast center. I mean, was it a lot of equipment that you had to get shipped in? Was it kind of just some household stuff that you had around that you helped with, books, maybe setting up cameras, or really what went into that?
No, household stuff. Are you kidding me? This is like they had to bring in all kinds. They had to get fancy dancy equipment because it's a robot. It's a robot system. So if the basement, and people can find pictures of it online. I got baby bedtime happening here, so I don't have the camera going because everything's a tornado zone. It's side by side robotic cameras with big fancy studio lights and giant monitor, and all of it had to be brought in. So it wasn't on trucks, but it was definitely in vans. And I hit a bunch of buttons in the morning, and my wife does the same on her side. And then from this basement, after a few clicks to 3 million plus people, it's pretty amazing when you think about it. But it's very, it's when you think about it and you break it down, it's incredible that it works. It really is.
Well, yeah, it's definitely a bigger production than what we're dealing with right now. Sal, final question of the show. When you see former players of yours go on to do bigger and better things, whether it be in the sport of baseball like Rich, or even outside the sport of baseball like Tony, how much pride does that bring to you as a coach to know that, you really you were part of a chapter in these guys' lives that really ended up going off in the right direction?
Yeah, it was definitely a small part of a small chapter of their lives. But anytime you see people like,
oh well, wait, hold on. Let me just, before Saul gets on this whole modest, small chapter kick here, I would just say, so how quickly did I pick up the phone and call you when I got a message from you? It was like within a half an hour. As soon as I saw it, I was like, I'm definitely going to pick up the phone. And I'm definitely going to do this hour because I don't think as a coach you make a small contribution. I think a good coach always makes a great contribution, and that's what I take away from that summer. So thank you.
Okay.
and then you can carry on now with whatever modesty you want to shovel off.
Yeah, right. Well, I appreciate it, Tony. I'm just proud of them. We have doctors, lawyers, journalists, coaches, just to be able to develop those memories from an early age and to watch them grow as individuals and be human beings to where they're at now. It's just phenomenal. It's amazing. We've had them, from big leaguers to Hunter Renfroe to, Brian Dozier, and it doesn't matter who it is. Just being able to touch their life in some type or some form or some capacity as they're in Povich and Bethesda is amazing. And that's why I've done it. I think this is 22 years, 21 years that I've been involved and managed. And we've had a lot of success, and a lot of success is based on, just getting good kids from good schools that want to represent and do the right thing. And I just want to show them a good time when they come to Bethesda. I mean, I know Tony was around our area for his, 4 or 5 years of college, but for those that aren't, like Rich and other people that are out of state, to show them what the Washington Metropolitan is like, to show them the culture, just the way people live and how happy everybody is, and the fast-paced, fast life of living in the city. And then when we play baseball, just in between the lines, play hard, do the little things, throw strikes, catch the ball, and execute the fundamentals, and we'll win a lot of ball games and have a lot of fun. And it's been a great ride. It's been very disappointing that we weren't able to play this year, just like Rich and everybody else had to make change and adjust. We're doing the same as an athletic director, doing the same in high schools. Unfortunately, the seniors don't get an extra year in high school. They do move on to bigger and better things, and they will. And I pray for every one of them, because it's just devastating not to play your senior year. I have a daughter that's a senior that doesn't get to walk across the stage because of this. But there's bigger things in life that we realize, and once we realize that, then society will be much better. So I appreciate you guys. I appreciate what you guys do every day. Tony, I watch your reruns more than you can imagine. And Rich, we talk all the time, baseball and kids and life and family. So thank you guys, because you are the foundation of what we built. And I will hopefully, Lord willing and health, I will continue it for the near future.
Thank you, Sal.
Thanks, Sal.
And Rich, I'm going to bother you. I'm going to send you an email, and I'm going to start bothering you on the phone. So get ready for that.
Better. I get all my news from you in the morning, so that's good.
Yeah, we'll have to do
yeah,
that.
right.
I'll
quiz you on it. I'll quiz you on it tomorrow.
No problem. I'm in. I get all my stuff either from you or from my other teammate Matt McCarthy. That's how I live. That's my two sources of news. So
that's right.
All right. That's
awesome.
Good. I'll take
Thank you guys so much for joining us today. This was an awesome show, and like Sal said, you guys are two of some of the best to come through this organization, and we really appreciate your guys' time. Thank you so much.
Thanks for.
Thank you, guys.
That's going to do it for this episode of Talkin Baseball. You can catch everything else